Captain Soren Price stood on the bridge of the Silver Dawn, gazing through the reinforced viewing panel at the vast emptiness beyond. Around him, monitors beeped softly, scanning this quiet edge of the galaxy for signs of life. He was used to routine patrols, especially near the boundaries of human space, but an uneasy hush had settled over him and his crew for days. The console lights reflected on his dark eyes, making his expression appear sharper than usual. Whenever they patrolled areas as remote as this, restlessness always crept in. Yet it was not only the routine that disquieted him this time. Something stirred in the back of his mind, a tension he could not fully name. He paced across the deck, arms folded behind his back. Lieutenant Kaya Farrell, sitting at the communication station, glanced over at him. Kaya was part human, part alien, with subtle markings on her wrists that hinted at her mixed heritage. In her role as comm specialist, she was constantly adjusting frequencies, scanning for anomalies, and bridging the linguistic gaps between humans and the galaxy's many other species. Though she and Soren had served together on 3 prior missions, something about today's readouts made her brows knit. She was certain her equipment wasn't malfunctioning. The faint, intermittent signal was real, and it wanted to be found. The hum of the Silver Dawn's engines underscored the quiet tension. Sergeant Reidenwolf, the weapons and engineering officer, lounged in his seat, though his posture betrayed a simmering wariness. He flicked a few switches on his console, calibrating the ship's railgun array, but his gaze drifted frequently to Kaya's station. If something was out there, they needed to be ready. The ship was lightly armed for its size, but the new railgun system still needed testing in a live scenario. Not that Raiden was eager to find a fight. He just believed in being prepared. He had a knack for anticipating mechanical and tactical issues before they arose. The faint beep from Kaya's console turned more insistent, and she quickly pressed a key to filter out background radiation. "Captain," she said, her voice low and urgent, "I'm getting a repeating transmission. It's definitely a distress signal, but it's not on any standard Alliance frequency. It's old, very old. The encryption is patchy at best." Soren stepped behind her, resting a hand on the back of her chair. He watched the lines of code flicker across her display. "Can you localize it?" Kaya nodded, her nimble fingers darting across the console. "Roughly. It seems to be coming from a planet near the edge of this sector. Hades 12. Not a place we'd expect any active outpost. We wrote it off years ago. It's a frozen wasteland with storms that can tear hull plating apart." Raiden snorted, pushing himself upright. "They call it a death trap. If anyone's broadcasting from there, they must be desperate or suicidal." He glanced at Soren. "Still want to investigate?" Soren's eyes narrowed. "Yes. The Silver Dawn is a UEDF vessel. We respond to distress signals, no matter where they come from. Plot a course for Hades 12. He paused, considering the swirling storm patterns the scanners now highlighted. "Let's try to land somewhere safe." The approach to Hades 12 was anything but smooth. Its upper atmosphere churned with bellowing ice storms, swirling white tendrils that battered the ship's shields. The planet was locked in a perpetual freeze, its star lying far beyond a comfortable range. Kaya diverted more power to the navigational sensors, seeking a small clearing in the never-ending storms. Raiden, monitoring the energy distribution, clenched his jaw as he watched the shield integrity dropping by the second. Even Soren, normally stoic, felt sweat prickle along his hairline at the risk of a catastrophic entry. They slipped through a narrow corridor of calmer air and broke beneath the roiling cloud layer, revealing a field of broken glaciers and snow-swept ridges. Sunlight, weak and filtered, barely reached the ground. Icy wind howled, sweeping translucent shards across an ancient crater. In that crater's center stood a collapsed structure, half buried under ice and snow. As soon as the Silver Dawn's landing struts touched the ground, the hull groaned from sub-zero pressure. The engines hummed in protest, but the ship settled. Inside, the crew readied themselves. They donned environmental suits lined with advanced thermal regulators. Soren insisted that everyone check their suits twice, especially their oxygen supply. Hades 12's atmosphere was technically breathable but so thin and cold it might as well have been lethal. Outside the main airlock, the wind threatened to pierce any gap in their armor. Soren led the way, stepping down the ramp onto the frozen surface. His boots crunched on the ice. His visor display automatically adjusted to highlight anomalies in the environment. Behind him, Raiden scanned for energy readings, and Kaya monitored the distress signal from a handheld device. The signal was indeed stronger here, repeating in intervals of roughly 4 seconds. But it was weaker than a normal broadcast, as if the transmitter was running on minimal power. They trudged across a shallow drift of snow, following the signal's beacon. Up close, the structure rose like a haunting relic of an older era, its metal beams twisted. Blast marks stained the edges, though time and ice had eroded many details. Kaya knelt by a section of wall. "Look at these scorch marks," she breathed. "They're not recent, but they're definitely from plasma-based weapons. This place wasn't just abandoned. Something violent happened here." Raiden swept the area with a handheld thermal scanner. Captain, picking up faint heat signatures, but it could be residual from a power generator. Could also be life forms. He tried to sound dismissive, but the tightness in his voice betrayed concern. Soren nodded. "Stay alert. We move in carefully." He signaled for Kaya to approach an entrance that had been forced open. The door, half torn from its hinges, led into a dark corridor. A swirl of frozen wind and snow had already invaded the interior. Icy stalactites hung from the ceiling. They advanced, flashlights cutting across twisted metal and old bullet casings. The echoes of their footsteps reverberated. Deeper into the facility, they found a small command center, the ceiling partially collapsed. Consoles covered in frost flickered with dying lights. Somehow, the power source had not been completely drained. Kaya ran her gloved fingers over a damaged control panel, brushing away snow. She was about to say something when Raiden stiffened, raising his pulse rifle. The beam of his flashlight revealed a figure slumped in a corner, a humanoid shape, spindly and thin, with grayish skin that had cracked in the cold. Soren approached carefully, his rifle at the ready. The figure did not move, and upon closer inspection, it appeared to have been dead for some time. "It's not human," Kaya whispered, kneeling beside the corpse. "Some sort of alien species I've never seen. Possibly a small colony of them lived here." She glanced around, noticing claw marks on the wall. They fought hard. But who attacked them? Raiden checked the readouts on his scanner. "Captain, there's a half-functioning data core in that console. Might explain what happened here if we can interface with it. It's also broadcasting the distress call." Before Soren could reply, a raspy sound echoed from the hallway beyond, a scraping noise followed by a weak hiss. The group went tense. Carefully, they followed the noise. On the floor, behind a battered metal crate, lay another alien. This one still clung to life, shivering uncontrollably, its eyes large and filled with fear. It was covered in a carapace-like plating, cracked in several places. At the sight of the humans, it let out a shrill cry and tried to back away, but it could barely move. Kaya immediately knelt and lowered her weapon. She murmured softly, more to calm than to communicate. The alien's breathing was erratic. Soren retrieved a portable medikit from his belt, but he wasn't sure if human medicine would help. When the alien coughed, droplets of thick, bluish fluid spattered on the icy floor. Raiden tried to scan it, eyes shifting with sympathy. This being was suffering. The alien suddenly grasped at Kaya's forearm, its mandibles quivering. It tried to form words in a language they didn't recognize. Kaya glanced at Soren, who nodded for her to try the universal translator built into her suit. She toggled it on. "We're here to help," she said clearly. "We received your distress signal." Crackling static filtered the alien's voice, and the translator struggled at first, but a faint approximation of speech emerged. "No trap," it managed. "Attack." Humans attacked. Others, its eyes fluttered closed from exhaustion. Then, with great effort, it whispered. Death came from the sky. Soren's heart pounded. Humans attacked this place? The Earth Defense Force? That sounded impossible. Or maybe it was some rogue faction, pirates using stolen gear. Kaya gently supported the alien's head. She could feel how light it was, how close it must be to death. The alien repeated its final plea. Please help us. Soren signaled to Raiden. We can't leave it here. We'll bring it back to the ship. Maybe we can stabilize its condition. He motioned to Kaya. You check that data core and see if you can recover logs. We need to know what we're dealing with. While Raiden carefully lifted the wounded alien, Kaya hurried to the battered console. She wiped the frost from the shattered interface. Her visor displayed lines of alien script. She initiated an emergency power bypass, hoping to extract data from the device's memory. What she saw next made her jaw tighten. Logs indicating an attack force using advanced weapons known to be Earth-designed. Hull signatures were listed, referencing ships with codes reminiscent of older UEDF designs. Kaya's face grew grim as she transferred the data to her own device. She felt a chill that went beyond the freezing air. A conflict within the Earth Defense Force? Or a shadowy group operating with human technology? She had heard rumors of black operations teams that answered to no official command. Perhaps these aliens had fallen victim to that. She shut down the console to preserve what little power remained and hurried after the others. They emerged into the howling wind, carrying the alien. Visibility was terrible, and swirling ice threatened to disorient them. Then in the half-light, Kaya spotted more shapes. Two more aliens lay motionless on the snow, their bodies battered by the storms. One was clearly dead. The other clung to life, but was unconscious, its plating scorched by energy blasts. The devastation felt overwhelming. Soren crouched, scanning the battered bodies. If they didn't move fast, these aliens would die, and any chance of knowing their story would die with them. So they rescued who they could, one conscious, one unconscious, and guided them back to the Silver Dawn. The ramp hissed closed behind them. Once inside the warmer airlock, they hurried to the med bay. Raiden placed the aliens on cots designed for humans, hooking them up to universal 4 lines that distributed a carefully calibrated fluid. They had no real knowledge of these aliens' physiology, but the universal solution might buy them time. Kaya moved to the cockpit, anxious to show Soren what she had found on the data core. The captain removed his helmet, exhaling a cloud of cold vapor. She brought up the partial logs. Evidence of a covert group, ships with designations that matched outdated Earth prototypes, an assault that left the settlement obliterated. Her voice trembled as she finished. It's not conclusive proof, but it's enough to raise serious questions. Soren's jaw set. We'll have to report this to command. In the meantime, we do everything we can to help these survivors. They lifted off from Hades, 12, fighting the raging winds. The Silver Dawn soared into the upper atmosphere, then punched through into orbit. Raiden steered them clear of a swirling vortex of debris-laden ice crystals, pushing the engines harder. Despite their best efforts, the hull sustained minor damage from the storm. But soon Hades, 12 became a frozen marble behind them, and the ship's artificial gravity settled into a smoother ride. In the med bay, the first alien regained enough consciousness to speak haltingly. Kaya sat near, universal translator engaged. The alien identified itself with a series of clicks that translated roughly to Mirahel. Mirahel's voice was soft but urgent. They came. We had no warning. Humans, or so we believed, but they wore black armor, used weapons that burned entire sections of our outpost. We fled underground. The transmissions we sent, we hoped for rescue. Mirahel closed its large eyes as if pained by the memory. This outpost was for research. We studied the planet's unique crystals. No military, nothing of threat to your Earth. Yet they slaughtered us. When Kaya asked if Mirahel recognized any insignias, the alien's mandibles clicked sadly. Not the usual Earth emblem. Something else hidden. The recordings might show it. Soren spoke quietly to Kaya, who nodded. They needed a place to treat these aliens properly and to investigate the data further. Their best bet was Nova Port, a moderately sized station at the edge of human-controlled space. It wasn't large, but it had medical facilities and was far enough from the core worlds to keep things discreet until they knew what they were dealing with. Once Soren set course for Novaport, he instructed Raiden to send a preliminary coded message to their immediate superior, Commander Vasquez, summarizing the situation. They left out specifics about the stolen technology until they could confirm it themselves. The journey took 2 days. During that time, the second alien, named Helash, remained unconscious. Mirahel stabilized, though it required specialized nutrients that the med bay could only approximate. Kaya used translation protocols to learn more about Mirahel species, which had apparently thrived in small pockets around the galaxy. They were not widely known, perhaps because their homeworld lay beyond mapped regions. Mirahel grew more trusting of Kaya, sensing her half-alien empathy. Sometimes it would reach out with a trembling hand, as though seeking reassurance that it was no longer alone. Raiden spent most of his free hours in the lower deck, running diagnostics on the Silver Dawn's weapons. He cursed under his breath whenever he saw anomalies in the power readings. "Just give me a real fight already," he muttered, though the last thing he truly wanted was more violence. He just believed they ought to be prepared. Novaport came into view, a mid-sized station orbiting a dull red planet. Named Kessera, the station's docking pylons glowed with navigational lights. Traffic was light, mostly cargo freighters. Soren guided the Silver Dawn into a vacant bay, and the docking clamps engaged with a reverberating clang. The station's interior docking corridor hissed as the pressure equalized. Upon arrival, medical staff rushed to examine Mirahel and Helash. Soren filed a preliminary report about rescued aliens from an unknown settlement, noting they needed immediate care. Commander Vasquez, a tall woman with silver streaks in her hair, arrived soon after. She listened intently as Soren laid out the situation, though he left out direct references to the suspicious Earth-based weapon signatures. Instead, he phrased it as possible stolen equipment. Vasquez frowned. "I'll have our intel division look at your logs. For now, I'd advise you not to spread rumors about some rogue Earth group. We have enough tension with certain council members. A scandal could escalate quickly." Soren sensed her caution and recognized it might stem from political concerns. But deep down, he suspected bigger forces were at play. He left her office with a heavy step, hoping their chain of command would do the right thing. Kaya accompanied Mirahel to the station's infirmary, not willing to let the alien face potentially suspicious staff alone. Raiden went off to oversee minor repairs to the Silver Dawn. They promised to meet up in a few hours at the station's central hub once the aliens were settled. The hub was a bustling cross-section of wide corridors lit by overhead panels. Civilian merchants, cargo haulers, and a handful of uniformed security officers mingled. Kaya was scanning through supply stores for alien-compatible nutrients when her handheld communicator pinged an urgent alarm. She glimpsed the screen. Infirmary breach. Unauthorized entry. Her heart hammered. She sprinted down the corridor, weaving between startled passers-by. She tapped the communicator to warn Soren, who answered in a clipped tone, "I'm on my way." By the time Kaya reached the infirmary, the doors were jammed, partially open. The station's automatic lights flickered. Inside, 2 medical staff lay on the floor, stunned or worse. Frantic footsteps resounded deeper in the corridor. Kaya raised her sidearm and advanced cautiously. She recognized the hiss of a plasma weapon discharge. Then she heard Mirahel's frightened chatter. Someone was inside, trying to eliminate the survivors. She gritted her teeth and pressed forward. She found them near the last ward. 3 intruders wearing matte black suits with tinted visors had cornered Mirahel, who clutched Helash's bed, refusing to let the unconscious alien fall. One intruder raised a pistol, aiming at Mirahel's chest. Kaya didn't hesitate. She squeezed her trigger, and her single shot slammed into his armor. He stumbled, pivoting back. The others whirled around, returning fire. Blinding plasma bolts streaked down the hallway. Kaya dove behind a toppled medical cart, her breath ragged. She risked a glance around the cart and saw Soren charging in from the opposite hallway, rifle raised. Raiden was with him, launching a burst of suppressive fire that forced the intruders to scatter. Mirahel whimpered in confusion and fear. One of the black-suited figures fired a small disc-like device that crackled with electricity, trying to short out the ward's lighting. The overhead bulbs sparked and died, plunging them into darkness. Alarms still howled. By the flicker of emergency lights, Soren advanced in careful bursts. Raiden flanked him, returning fire. The black-suited assailants coordinated expertly, too expertly to be mere bounty hunters. They swapped positions in practiced maneuvers. One intruder made a dash for Hilash's bed, but Kaya sprang from cover, discharging her weapon again. She caught him in the back. With a cry, he went down. The second intruder moved to retreat, realizing they were outgunned, but Soren lunged forward, slamming the butt of his rifle into the intruder's visor. The glass cracked, and a muffled grunt escaped. The intruder staggered. Before Soren could demand answers, the third intruder tossed a grenade that belched a thick black smoke. Under its cover, they grabbed their fallen comrade's arm and dragged him toward an emergency exit. By the time the smoke cleared, they were gone. Frantic medical staff rushed in. Kaya coughed, guiding Mirahel back to a safer corner. Raiden fanned away the last of the smoke. Soren stood over the burned remains of the attackers' left-behind gear, retrieving a small fragment of armor plating. He turned it over in his hands. There was no insignia, no serial number, but it looked suspiciously advanced. He stared at it with grim realization. These are not amateurs. They came here with a plan. Mirahel curled into a protective crouch, still clutching Helash. Slowly, the alien lifted its gaze. They want us dead. They don't want the truth spoken. Its voice sounded as though it might shatter from fear. Station security soon arrived, but the attackers had vanished. They had jammed the cameras, leaving only a few patchy images of black-clad figures. In Commander Vasquez's office, Soren and his team laid out the events, showing her the recovered armor fragment. Her expression hardened, though a flicker of uncertainty crossed her eyes. "I'll file a station-wide alert, but I doubt they're still here," she said. "They'd have used a stealth transport. Our external sensors won't spot them if they're that sophisticated." Soren tapped a finger on a desk. "Commander, we have reason to believe some covert group, maybe even from within Earth's ranks, carried out these attacks. We can't just hush this up. We need to escalate this to higher authority. The entire Alliance Council might need to be involved." He glanced at Kaya. "We can't keep these aliens safe on Novaport. It's not secure enough." Vasquez nodded slowly. "I understand your position, but we can't risk stirring massive panic with unverified accusations. Let me contact Earth Defense High Command, see if there's an official Black Ops division operating in this region. Meanwhile, keep your new friends on board your ship or somewhere guarded." Soren left with clenched fists, not fully trusting that official channels wouldn't bury this scandal. On his way out, he nearly bumped into a tall, imposing figure wearing an elegant uniform of alien design. The alien introduced himself in a calm voice. "Ezotharaz. I heard you and your crew prevented an atrocity here." Ezotharaz was from a major species within the Galactic Council, known for their diplomatic influence. His posture spoke of discipline and authority. He fixed Soren with a penetrating gaze. "I want to help. If these survivors were targeted, it's not just a local matter. Rumors have reached me that hidden factions in your Earth forces are violating Council treaties. I've come to Novaport to investigate ongoing allegations of wrongdoing. It seems you found a fresh case." Soren regarded him warily, but something in Ezo's demeanor conveyed sincerity. With a swift nod, he accepted the offer. They arranged a meeting in a secure lounge, away from prying ears. There, Soren, Kaya, Raiden, and Ezo discussed the next steps. Mirahel quietly sat nearby, still trembling from the earlier attack. Ezo studied the data logs from Hades 12, noting the matching patterns of Earth-based tech. "We must present this to the Council," Ezo said. "There's more at stake than just your Earth. This has broader implications for interstellar law." Raiden raised a concerned eyebrow. "If a Black Ops group is behind this, they'll try again. We need a better stronghold." Ezo proposed heading to the capital system of the Alliance, where the Council convened on a massive orbital station. If they could produce evidence and living witnesses, the council might be forced to act. Soren agreed, though he worried about an ambush en route. Still, it was the only way to shed light on these crimes. They had to move quickly. A day later, a small escort of ships was arranged by Ezzo's connections. Ezzo believed that official alliance ships would deter would-be attackers. But as the convoy set out from Nova Port, Soren couldn't shake a feeling of looming peril. During the short jump to the capital sector, Helash briefly regained consciousness, blinking at the overhead lights, confused by everything. Mirahel tried to comfort their companion, but Helash's eyes were full of lingering terror. Kaya did her best to reassure them that they were safe, that they were heading to reveal the truth. They emerged from hyperspace to find themselves a few parsecs from the fabled capital station. This station was a colossal structure, ringed by docking arms and glimmering with 1,000 lights. Dozens of smaller ships orbited like bees around a hive. Here resided representatives from countless star systems. If justice existed anywhere, it should be here. Yet they would never find out if they didn't survive the journey. Halfway to the station, alarms flared across the Silver Dawn. Hostile signatures appeared on the scanners. 5, then 6, then 8 unidentified ships. They powered up weapons. Soren gripped the controls of the Silver Dawn from the cockpit, shouting for Raiden to divert power to shields. The escort ships scrambled to form a defensive perimeter, but the approaching craft fanned out expertly. They opened fire in unison, plasma bolts slamming into the escorts. Soren recognized the formation as an Earth-based tactic, though the ships carried no standard transponder codes. It confirmed every dark suspicion they'd had. The chaos was instantaneous. The escorts tried to return fire, but the ambushers targeted the lead ship's engines, crippling it. The vacuum of space lit up with pulses of bright energy, dancing arcs of destruction. On board the Silver Dawn, Kaya tried to hail the capital's security forces, but the jamming was intense, blocking or distorting their signals. Ezzo Tharaz took a seat at the secondary comm console, attempting to relay an emergency call. His voice grew taut with frustration. Mirahel and Helash, strapped in the passenger bay, trembled as the ship rattled under repeated impacts. Raiden cursed as the power reading dipped dangerously close to the red zone. "Our shields won't hold out against a prolonged assault," he said, rerouting auxiliary power. "We can't outrun them, either. They're cornering us." Soren refused to surrender. "We need a fallback point. Kaya, scan for any station or outpost with defenses we can utilize. Somewhere to hold them off until we break through the jamming." She scoured local charts and found an abandoned weapons station on a nearby asteroid. According to old data, it once belonged to a now-defunct Earth division. Possibly it retained automated turrets. "Coordinates are in," she said. "We're not sure if it's operational, but it's better than nothing." Under heavy fire, they peeled away from the direct route to Capital Station, diving toward the asteroid field where the old station was rumored to be. The attacking ships followed, unleashing fusillades that rocked the Silver Dawn. One escort fighter exploded in a burst of superheated gas, and a shockwave buffeted the Dawn, jarring Helash's harness. Mirahel cried out, clinging to their injured companion. The asteroid field was a labyrinth of spinning rocks. Soren piloted with razor focus, weaving around chunks of ice and stone. A glancing shot punched through a portion of the hull, sending sparks flying in the cockpit. Raiden jumped from his chair to staunch the meltdown in the power conduit. "We're losing pressure in Deck 2, he shouted above the alarm sirens. "I can patch it, but we'll be fragile." Beyond the largest asteroids, a faint glimmer indicated an artificial structure. Through the swirling dust, they saw a battered platform bristling with the silhouettes of old turrets. The main docking ring was half-collapsed. A cloud of debris drifted around it, presumably from some long-ago battle. "That's our station," Kaya called. Soren accelerated, bracing for the final gauntlet of incoming fire. The enemy ships closed in, determined to land a decisive blow. But the Silver Dawn slipped beneath a large asteroid fragment, forcing a pursuer to smash into the rock. A burst of metal and flame flared on the sensors. Raiden couldn't help a brief smirk. One down. They threaded the station's perimeter, rotating the Silver Dawn to match a docking clamp that still functioned. With a screech, they latched onto it. They had no time for a proper landing cycle. "Brace yourselves," Soren shouted. The impact slammed everyone against their harnesses. Systems flickered. Then, with a final groan, the ship settled. Soren exhaled. "Raiden, keep the Silver Dawn from exploding. Kaya, Ezo, come with me. Let's see if we can bring these old defenses online." The airlock opened onto a half-pressurized corridor. The station interior was dark, the bulkheads scorched with the remnants of ancient battles. It had presumably been abandoned decades ago. Raiden stayed behind at the ship's engineering panel, hooking into the station's power grid from the dock. Through an improvised data link, he aimed to feed the turrets some energy. Meanwhile, Soren, Kaya, and Ezo pressed deeper into the station, stepping over debris and half-burned crates. They found a main control room behind a sealed blast door. Kaya used her hacking module to bypass the security protocols. The door screeched open, revealing rows of dusty terminals. Ezo hurried to a console marked with old Earth characters. "These systems are archaic," he muttered, "but maybe we can get them running." Soren turned to Kaya. "You handle the security software. I'll try to manually prime the turret relays." He keyed his suit radio to Raiden. "We're in position. Get ready to feed power on my mark." Outside, the enemy ships circled warily. They must have realized the station still had some level of capability. A few scouted ahead with small drones that beeped along the hull. Inside, wires sparked, lights flickered, and old mechanical fans roared to life. Alarms shrieked about power fluctuations. The entire station shuddered as ancient circuits struggled to handle the sudden load. Raiden, back in the docking bay, typed feverishly on a console, redirecting power from unused modules to the defensive grid. He shouted through the comm, "Now, Soren." Soren engaged the master relay. The room crackled with electricity, and overhead screens lit up. Outside, the turrets groaned, rotating for the first time in decades. A harsh hum resonated as they drew power from the Silver Dawn's generator. The nearest enemy fighter must have noticed because it fired a flurry of plasma bolts at the station's hull. One bolt struck a turret mount, sending molten metal spraying, but the turret responded, unleashing a streak of bright energy that ripped through the attacker. The fighter erupted in a silent explosion. The success energized them. "We got one," Kaya exclaimed, scanning the sensor feed. The station was still shaky. Only about half of its turrets were functional, but each shot hammered the enemy formation. Several attackers retreated behind asteroid cover. Another tried a frontal assault, only to be incinerated by a combined volley from the station's cannons. In the docking bay, Mirahel clung to Helash, who moaned in pain. Raiden ran to them, hooking up an additional oxygen supply. The battered hull trembled under more hits. He tapped Soren on the radio. "We can't stay here forever. They'll saturate us with enough firepower eventually. We need reinforcements." Ezo frowned at a flickering screen. "The jamming is still strong. But wait, I see an opening in their interference. Let me try to broadcast a short-range distress call." He typed a complex sequence, rerouting the station's comlink array. A wave of static hissed through the speakers, then a partial success, an open channel. He repeated an emergency code in the galactic standard language. They held their breath, hoping someone would pick up. The station's turrets continued to engage the enemy ships, but every shot drained more power from the Silver Dawn. The corridor lights dimmed. Suddenly, a voice broke through the static. "This is Admiral Rhea Morales of the UEDF Dreadnought Resolute Purpose." "Who is broadcasting?" Relief flooded Soren. "Admiral, we are pinned down by hostile forces using Earth technology. We have wounded alien survivors in need of protection. Request immediate assistance." Morales' measured tone came back swiftly. "Coordinates received. Stand by. Jumping to your location now. Hang tight, Lieutenant." A fresh wave of enemy fire battered the asteroid station. One of the main turrets exploded in a shower of sparks, nearly knocking Kaya off her feet. Two more enemy fighters closed in for a final strike. But just as the station's power grids threatened to fail, space tore open. The dreadnought Resolute Purpose emerged from hyperspace, flanked by a dozen UEDF warships. They wasted no time. Turbo lasers flashed across the void, tearing into the enemy formation with ruthless precision. Overwhelmed by the sudden arrival of a major Earth fleet, the rogue attackers scrambled to retreat. A handful of them managed micro-jumps, vanishing into folds of space. Inside the battered station, Soren and his allies slumped in exhaustion, grateful for the rescue. A short time later, they reconnected with the dreadnought. Reinforcement teams boarded the station to assist in repairs and to evacuate survivors. Admiral Morales herself greeted Soren with a handshake, eyes full of concern. "Lieutenant, I received a partial report from Commander Vasquez in your urgent broadcast. This is bigger than we thought, isn't it?" Soren nodded gravely. "Yes, Admiral. We have evidence that certain elements within Earth's own military might be involved in covert exterminations, targeting alien settlements. Our leads point to a Black Ops group. We must bring this to the Alliance Council." Morales agreed, ordering a jump to the capital system. With her dreadnought's escort, no one dared challenge them. Ezo Tharaz, Mirahel, and Helash were transferred to a medical bay on the Resolute Purpose, receiving far better care. The atmosphere there was tense, but hopeful, as people realized new truths were about to be revealed. Raiden, though battered, helped engineers from the dreadnought restabilize the Silver Dawn so they could make the final journey together. At last, they reached the capital station. It was even grander up close, an immense ring-like structure with layered docking arms, shimmering with the power of hundreds of advanced reactors. Thousands of delegates, ambassadors, and staff from across the galaxy called this place home. Morales secured immediate clearance for a council hearing. Such expedited sessions were rare, signifying how grave the matter was. Soren, Kaya, Raiden, Ezo, and the two alien survivors were escorted through the station's gleaming corridors, watched by silent, stern-faced guards. They passed beneath colossal arches engraved with the insignias of dozens of species. The main council chamber was a vast, circular arena, with balconies for each represented world. At the center, a raised podium awaited them. Counselors and officials, each wearing robes or uniforms of their species, turned to observe. An ashen-skinned counselor named Kale Vor presided, his elongated eyes revealing little emotion. The lights dimmed as Admiral Morales introduced the case. Soren stepped forward with Kaya, projecting the recovered data logs. Chilling footage from Hades, 12 recordings of black-armored humanoids tearing apart the outpost, the matching signatures of advanced Earth tech. Then Mirahel, trembling but resolute, offered personal testimony through the translator. Its words echoed in the hush. "Our people were unarmed researchers. They came, they killed, and they left us to die." A heavy silence stretched. For a moment, it looked as though the council was truly disturbed. Then Kale Vor tapped a command. Several screens flickered, and the feed from Soren's logs began to cut out. The translator garbled. A wave of hush spread across the chamber. Raiden clenched his fists, suspecting sabotage. Ezo Tharaz's eyes blazed with anger. Soren tried to speak, but the microphone hissed with static. Counselor Vor's voice sounded oddly final. "We acknowledge your information and will convene an inquiry. That is all." A series of abrupt clicks signaled the termination of the hearing. Guards stepped forward, gesturing for them to leave the central floor. Many delegates rose from their seats, wearing carefully neutral expressions. Some seemed troubled. Others avoided eye contact. The entire session ended in confusion, with no official statement of condemnation, no plan of action. As they were escorted out, Soren's frustration boiled. He locked eyes with Vor, who stared back impassively. "This isn't over," Soren said, voice resonating in the suddenly silent corridor. Vor offered no reply. They emerged into the station's outer halls. Ezo Tharaz seethed. They knew. Someone here wants this buried. The council as a whole might not be complicit, but certain powerful elements definitely are. Admiral Morales placed a steady hand on Soren's shoulder. Your evidence still stands. We'll release it to certain allies who will not bow to the council's hush orders. The truth will spread, no matter their attempts. Raiden looked at the haggard faces of Mirahel and Helash. The aliens had come so far, endured so much, only to see this stony reception. Yet in their eyes he saw a spark of something new. Hope that not every human was an enemy, that not every official was corrupt. They had found allies willing to stand by them. Kaya ushered the pair into a quieter alcove near the docking terminals. There, surrounded by the gentle hum of distant machinery, she spoke softly. We'll protect you. We won't let them silence your voices. The translator relayed her words, and Mirahel's mandibles trembled in gratitude. Ezo Tharaz inclined his head. This is not the victory we wanted, but it's a start. We must remain vigilant. There will be consequences. Soren exhaled, shoulders tense. At least we prevented them from killing these survivors. We have the raw data. Even if the council tries to ignore it, we can find other ways. Admiral Morales will stand with us. Others will, too. A cold breeze seemed to flow through the station's corridors, possibly an effect of the massive environmental systems. For a moment, they all stood quietly, lost in thought. The galaxy was vast, full of hidden agendas and corrupt powers. But it was also full of those who saw these injustices and refused to remain silent. Soren's gaze drifted to the viewport, overlooking the swirl of stars beyond. The final glimmer of Hades' 12 system was an invisible speck from here. That lonely outpost distress signal had reached them, and in answering the call, they had glimpsed a secret that spanned across the galaxy. He turned to Kaya, Raiden, Ezo, and the aliens. This is only one battle. We might have lost the immediate hearing, but we'll keep pushing. If we give up, that Black Ops group will keep slaughtering. We owe it to every innocent life destroyed. Kaya nodded, a steely glint in her eyes. Raiden readjusted his jacket, his expression set. Ezo placed a hand against his chest in a gesture of solemn determination, and Mirahel bowed. In that exchange, they all recognized that a new alliance had formed. Together, they would uncover more truths, gather more allies, and force the Council, or any power that sheltered these killers, to face justice. Steps echoed as Admiral Morales returned, flanked by her personal guard. We'll be departing soon, she said. It appears the Council sees no reason to detain us. I suspect they'd rather have us out of sight. We can take you to a secure sector to plan our next moves. After that, it's up to you where your investigation leads. Soren looked down the corridor, where a pair of guards had once stood. Now it was empty. In that moment, he felt the weight of a war still unwaged, fought not only with weapons, but with revelations, alliances, and unwavering resolve. The group moved on, leaving behind the chamber that had dismissed them so curtly. Overhead, hidden cameras might have tracked their every step, but they pressed forward. Outside a massive viewport, starlight glimmered across the hulls of countless ships. The dreadnought waited in the docking ring, a silent symbol of Earth's power. Soren sensed an undercurrent of irony. That same power, twisted, had brought ruin to innocent aliens. And yet it was also Earth's power now sheltering them. Humans had answered a distress call that soared across the gulf of space. A call that changed not just the fate of 2 survivors, but perhaps the fate of the entire galaxy. In quiet, purposeful unison, they boarded the next shuttle, each with thoughts swirling, each with questions about what came next. There would be more secrets to uncover, more battles to fight. But for now, their most pressing task was to ensure Mirahel and Helash survived and that their voices would not be silenced. At the shuttle's entrance ramp, Ezo Tharaz paused, turning to gaze at the rows of lights that lined the station's curved hull. He spoke softly. No matter how they resist the truth, it will find its way. Soren nodded in agreement, stepping past him. Raiden sealed the hatch behind them. Kaya offered a gentle smile to Mirahel and Helash, letting them know they were safe for the moment. In the hum of the shuttle's engines, they felt a new sense of purpose. They took their seats, strapped in, and lifted away from the docking port. With a subdued roar, the shuttle soared through the station's layered airlocks and out into the star-flecked void. The dreadnought welcomed them, swallowing them in its cavernous hangar. As the bay doors sealed shut, Soren placed a hand on the shuttle's window. Out there, beyond layers of metal and bureaucracy, lay the broken shards of so many atrocities. But also out there were free worlds, uncharted wonders, and voices that, if combined, could resound across the galaxies. The answers humanity would give next might determine not just the future of these two aliens, but the destiny of countless others. In that realization, the seeds of hope and defiance took root. He closed his eyes, hearing the hiss of the docking clamps, the muffled chatter of mechanics and ground crew. This would only be the beginning of a new journey. Earth's official stance might be compromised in places, and the Alliance Council might be reluctant to challenge its hidden forces. But a single distress call, faint and nearly lost, had reached across time and space. Humanity had answered. Nothing will be the same. And somewhere, in the quiet hum of the dreadnought's corridors, Soren Price allowed himself one moment of relief before the battles ahead. They had survived. The truth still lived. The galaxy was on the cusp of change.